You have to laugh, or else you might actually lose your mind looking at the state of the legacy media right now. It is truly bizarre. I mean, really, just look at the headlines circulating this week regarding the Department of Justice. It is a perfect case study in what I call the woke mind virus operating at a systemic level. The DOJ, under the new administration, simply decides to enforce the law as it was actually written, as in, do not discriminate against people based on the color of their skin. Pretty standard stuff. The absolute first principle of American justice, right? The 14th Amendment, equal protection. And yet, the headlines? They are screaming. They are practically hyperventilating. They say the DOJ is, and, I quote, shifting focus to protect white people. Just think about the semantic architecture of that sentence for a second. It is fascinating. It is Orwellian. It is actually Orwellian. They have managed to invert the meaning of words to the point where stopping racial discrimination is framed as an act of aggression, provided the target of the discrimination is the wrong demographic. It is a logic error, a fatal exception in their moral code. To the legacy media, to the New York Times and CNN, who are basically just NPCs reading from the same buggy teleprompter script, the concept of fairness has been overwritten. They cannot compute a world where justice is blind. They operate on a hierarchy of grievance. To them, if you stop punishing one group based on their race, you are attacking civil rights. It is laughable, but it is also deeply disturbing. They use this term, reverse discrimination. You hear it everywhere. The DOJ is validating claims of reverse discrimination. There is no reverse discrimination. There is just discrimination. It is a Boolean value, true or false. Are you judging someone based on their hardware, their skin color, their gender, or are you judging them based on their software, their competence, their character, their output? If the answer is hardware, that is racism. It does not matter which direction the vector points. But the media is in a panic because the DOJ is finally deleting a piece of malicious code that has been running in the background of our legal system for decades. This concept of disparate impact, it sounds boring. It sounds like legalese. But it is actually the root access exploit that allowed the mind virus to infect everything from corporate hiring to university admissions. It effectively told society, we do not care if your process was fair. We do not care if you had zero intent to discriminate. If the data output is not perfectly equal across all groups, you are guilty. That is insanity. That is anti-logic. It is like blaming a thermometer because it measures different temperatures in different rooms. You do not smash the thermometer to fix the temperature. You fix the insulation. You fix the root cause. But the Democrats and the media apparatus, they want to rig the thermometer. They want to hard-code the output. And when Donald Trump or the DOJ steps in and says, no, we are going to look at the actual code, we are going to look at intent, the system reacts like a biological organism fighting off a vaccine. The immune reaction of the old system is to scream, racism. Whenever someone tries to restore meritocracy, they are terrified. Truly, because if we actually go back to a system where people are judged on merit, on their capabilities, on their contribution to the civilization, then the entire industry of grievance, the entire DEI industrial complex, collapses. Their value proposition hits zero. So, ignore the noise. The noise is high amplitude, but it is low information. The signal here is actually very simple. The DOJ isn't protecting white people. They are debugging the operating system of American justice. They are removing a loop that caused the system to crash. And frankly, it is about time. We need a system that optimizes for competence, not identity. Anything else is just civilizational suicide. To understand why this is civilizational suicide, you have to look at the kernel of the operating system. You have to look at the mechanism. This is not about feelings. This is about a fundamental logic error that was hard-coded into American law and corporate policy. The root cause, the actual bug in the system, is this legal concept called disparate impact. Most people do not know what this means, but it effectively dictates how every major institution in America operates. The theory of disparate impact argues that a policy, say, a math test for hiring engineers, is illegal discrimination if it results in different outcomes for different demographic groups. Note that I did not say the test was biased. I did not say the questions were unfair. The test could be completely neutral. It could be purely questions about calculus and fluid dynamics. But if one group scores lower on average than another group, under the doctrine of disparate impact, the test itself is considered racist. Think about that from a first principles perspective. It is a logical fallacy of the highest order. It confuses correlation with causation. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you have a scale, a precise digital scale. You weigh 1,000 people. The data comes back, and it shows that, on average, men weigh more than women. Under the logic of disparate impact, the scale is sexist. The scale is discriminating against women because the output data is not identical. So, what is the solution proposed by the woke mind virus? You do not try to understand the biological inputs, muscle mass, bone density, height that cause the difference. No. You calibrate the scale to lie. You rig the software to add 10 pounds to one group and subtract 10 pounds from another until the graph looks equal. You have now destroyed the utility of the scale. It is no longer a measurement tool. It is a propaganda tool. This is exactly what has happened to the American meritocracy. Because companies, universities, and government agencies are terrified of being sued by the DOJ for disparate impact, they have stopped testing for competence. They have stopped optimizing for the best inputs. Instead, they are reverse engineering the hiring process to guarantee a specific demographic output. In engineering terms, this is introducing massive entropy into the system. You are replacing a high-fidelity signal competence with a noisy variable identity. I have seen this personally. At SpaceX and Tesla, we have one mission: make life multiplanetary and accelerate sustainable energy. To do that, I need the best brains on Earth. I need people who dream in differential equations. I do not care if they are white, black, brown, male, female, or anything else. The physics of a rocket engine does not care about your identity. If the O-ring fails, the rocket blows up. Physics is the ultimate meritocracy. But the legacy system, the Biden administration's DOJ, they attacked us. They actually sued SpaceX because we were not hiring enough asylum seekers. Think about the absurdity of that. We deal with ITAR, International Traffic in Arms Regulations. We deal with advanced weapons technology. By law, I can only hire U.S. citizens or permanent residents for national security reasons. But one arm of the government sues me for obeying the laws of another arm of the government, all because our demographic spreadsheet didn't match their arbitrary quotas. This is the DI malware. Diversity, equity, and inclusion sounds nice. It is a marketing term. But equity does not mean equal opportunity. We all agree on equal opportunity. That is a noble goal. Equity means equal outcome. And the only way to guarantee equal outcome among human beings who have different talents, different work ethics, and different interests is to cap the performance of the best and artificially prop up the rest. It is a resource allocation algorithm that is fundamentally broken. It allocates jobs, scholarships, and positions of power based on a hierarchy of victimhood rather than a hierarchy of competence. When you run this code for long enough, you get what we are seeing now: incompetent pilots, doors falling off airplanes, and government officials who cannot answer basic questions. You create a society where people are promoted to the level of their incompetence simply to satisfy a quota. This is why the current shift, the actions by the new DOJ, are so critical. They are finally acknowledging that the input data matters. They are acknowledging that if you want a fair system, you judge the process, not the result. If the process is fair, if the test is blind, then you have to accept the results, whatever they are. That is reality. The Democrats and the media have been trying to code a simulation where reality doesn't exist, where they can legislate the bell curve out of existence. Trump isn't attacking rights. He is simply deleting the disparate impact subroutine. He is returning the system to its factory settings. Intent. Under the new guidance, or rather, the restored guidance, you actually have to prove someone meant to discriminate. You have to prove mens rea, a guilty mind. That is the standard for every other crime in existence. Why should discrimination be different? So, when you hear them screaming about rolling back protections, translate that in your head. What they are really saying is, we are losing the ability to rig the outcome. They are angry because the scale is about to start showing the real weight again. And for a political party that has built its entire power base on identity grievance, the truth is a fatal error. And because that error is fatal to their entire operating model, they were never going to fix it themselves. You cannot ask a virus to delete itself. It goes against its programming. That is why you need an external force. You need a forcing function. This is how I view Donald Trump and the current Department of Justice. I do not look at this through the lens of personality. I look at it through the lens of utility. In engineering, when a system is bogged down by thousands of lines of conflicting code that are causing it to overheat and fail, you do not keep adding more patches on top of the mess. You perform a hard reset. You revert to the last known stable configuration. That is exactly what this DOJ is doing. They are not attacking rights. They are simply restoring the legal standard to what it was always intended to be. The concept is called mens rea, a guilty mind. It is a fundamental principle of Western civilization. It means that, to be convicted of a crime, you must have intended to commit the crime. For decades, under the Disparate Impact regime, the Democrats deleted mens rea from civil rights law. They made it so you could be guilty by accident. They made it so a neutral process could be a crime. Trump is effectively saying, no, we are re-uploading the original Constitution. Under this new, or rather, original framework, the government has to prove that you actually hated someone. They have to prove you actually intended to discriminate. This sounds like a minor technicality, but it is actually a massive optimization for the entire U.S. economy. It means companies can stop hiring armies of consultants to navigate a minefield of imaginary crimes. It reduces the latency in decision-making. It frees up bandwidth for actual innovation. Now, let's talk about the enforcement. The media is hyperventilating because the DOJ is now launching investigations into DI programs in states like Minnesota and Rhode Island. They call this revenge. They call it weaponizing the Justice Department. That is a profound misreading of the situation. If you have a state government that is explicitly illegally discriminating against people based on their race, even if they call it affirmative action or equity, that is a violation of the 14th Amendment. It is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. When Harmeet Tillen and the DOJ go into those states, they are not seeking revenge. They are performing surgery. They are cutting out a tumor that has wrapped itself around the spine of the state. Is surgery painful? Yes. Does the patient scream? Sometimes. But you do not judge the surgeon by the amount of blood on the floor. You judge him by whether the patient survives and gets better. The patient here is the American meritocracy. And we have to be very clear about this concept of reverse discrimination that the media keeps using to defend these programs. They use it to imply that discriminating against a white male is somehow different, somehow softer, than discriminating against a minority. From a logic standpoint, this is absurd. Discrimination is a vector with a magnitude. It does not matter where the arrow points. If you say, we are going to hire this person because of their race, you are corrupting the data set. You are introducing noise. There is no such thing as good discrimination. It is all entropy. It all degrades the quality of the system. Trump understands this instinctively. He is a builder. He knows that if you use substandard steel to build a skyscraper, just because the steel supplier checks a diversity box, the building falls down. So, by removing the legal shield for DEI, by suing these programs into oblivion, the Trump administration is effectively removing a tax on competence. Think about the optimization this unlocks. For the last 10 or 15 years, American corporations have been operating with a massive handicap. They have been optimizing for two contradictory variables, profit and diversity. Any mathematician will tell you that you cannot maximize two independent variables simultaneously. You have to pick one. By removing the legal threat of disparate impact, Trump is allowing American industry to go back to maximizing one variable, value. This means the best engineer gets the job. The best pilot flies the plane. The best doctor performs the surgery. Does that mean the demographics of the workforce might shift? Yes. The data output will look different. But the performance, the GDP, the safety, the innovation will skyrocket. This is not cruelty. This is efficiency. We are in a global competition with nations that do not handicap themselves with these mind viruses. China is not worrying about the diversity statistics of their rocket scientists. They are worrying about physics. If we want to compete, if we want to remain the dominant civilization, we have to stop playing these political games and get back to reality. Trump is the only one willing to take the heat for flipping that switch. He is the wrecking ball that clears the site so we can actually build something that stands, and that, regardless of what the New York Times says, is the most pragmatic thing a president can do. But we have to look past the pragmatism of the moment. We have to look at the horizon, because what's at stake here isn't just the next election cycle. It's the next century. It's the survival of the technosphere itself. If we don't fix this, if we don't correct the trajectory we are on, the airplane doesn't just get delayed. The airplane crashes, and I mean that literally and metaphorically. Civilization itself hits the ground. You have to understand, entropy is the default state of the universe. Chaos is the norm. Order is this incredibly rare, fragile thing that we have to maintain with immense effort. And right now, we are letting the maintenance lapse. We are replacing the engineers with activists, and you can see the cracks forming in the foundation. You can see it in the data. You can see it in the skies. We are facing a competence crisis, and it's terrifying because it's happening in the systems that keep us alive. When you prioritize diversity or equity or whatever buzzword is in the annual report, when you prioritize that over raw, objective competence, you get incompetence. It's simple physics. You cannot optimize for two variables that are not correlated. If you optimize for identity, you are, by definition, sub-optimizing for skill. Look at Boeing. This was the pinnacle of American engineering. The company that built the 747, the company that put the world on jet engines. And then you look at the shift in incentives. In 2022, they changed the executive incentive plan. It wasn't just about safety and quality anymore. They added diversity, equity, and inclusion as a critical focus area. They set a goal to have 90% diverse interview slates, and they hit 92%. And you have to ask, when you are incentivizing executives to chase demographic targets, are they looking for the best engineer, or are they looking for the engineer that fills the spreadsheet? And then, the door plug blows off an Alaska Airlines flight. That is a quality escape. That is the polite term for it. But what it really is a breakdown in the O-ring chain of competence. You cannot have a safety culture if you are afraid to hire the best person because they might be the wrong demographic. Do you want to fly in an airplane where they prioritize DEI hiring over your safety? Because that is actually happening. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's in their SEC filings. And it's not just planes. It's medicine. This is where it gets really dark. I had this debate with Don Lemon, and he said there was no evidence that standards were being lowered. But look at UCLA. The David Geffen School of Medicine, one of the best in the world. They have an acceptance rate of 1.3%, extremely exclusive. But the data shows they started admitting students, specifically from underrepresented groups, whose test scores and grades were far below the UCLA average. And what happened? You can't fake physics, and you can't fake medicine. The number of students failing the shelf exams, the basic standardized tests you take after clinical rotations, that number spiked. We are pushing people through medical school who cannot pass the basic competency tests because we want racial diversity so badly we are willing to cut corners. Think about what that means. It means in 10 years, you are going to be on an operating table, and the surgeon standing over you, holding a scalpel to your brain, might be there not because they had the steadiest hands, not because they were the absolute best, but because they filled a quota. I don't want that. You don't want that. I want the surgeon who is a fanatic about perfection. Period. If we lower the standards for doctors, people will die. That is the cost of this ideology. It is paid in human lives. This is the virus, the woke mind virus. It's not just being nice, it's a pathogen that attacks the immune system of civilization. It teaches people that objective reality doesn't matter, that merit is racist, that math is oppressive. It creates this mental architecture where you are either a permanent victim or a permanent oppressor based on your skin color. And that destroys solidarity. You cannot have a civilization if everyone hates each other, if you teach your children that their history is evil, that their ancestors were monsters. It leads to internal war, not peace. It fragments society into these warring tribes fighting over a shrinking pie. Instead of working together to bake a bigger one, it's anti-human. And if you want to see where this road ends, if you want to see the future of America, if we don't flip that switch, look at South Africa. I grew up there. I know what happens when you replace technical competence with political grievance. Look at Eskom and the power utility. In 2001, it was the global power company of the year. It was world class. But then, they decided that transformation was more important than electricity. Between 2013 and 2015, they pushed out the skilled white engineers. They paid them to leave. Space creation, they called it, to meet racial targets. They purged the institutional memory. They fired the people who knew how to keep the lights on. And now, the grid is collapsing. You have load shedding, blackouts for 10, 12 hours a day. The economy is being strangled. The infrastructure is crumbling because the politics of identity superseded the physics of engineering. And they are still doing it. Even as the country goes dark, they are arguing about quotas. That is the trajectory we are on. The FAA is trying to recruit people with severe intellectual disabilities. Medical schools are abandoning standardized tests. Boeing is chasing DEI targets. We are South Africa in slow motion. If we don't stop this, in 50 years, America won't be sending starships to Mars. We won't even be able to keep the lights on. We will be living in the ruins of the civilization our grandparents built. Wondering what happened? This is why I talk about the Great Filter. You know, the Fermi paradox. Why haven't we seen aliens? Maybe it's because civilizations, when they get comfortable, when they solve the basic problems of survival, they turn inward. They get infected by this mind virus that makes them obsessed with internal squabbles, with equity and grievance. Instead of expansion and exploration, they stop reproducing. Look at the birth rates. The woke culture is fundamentally antinatalist. It views humans as a cancer. They stop inventing. Because technology is dangerous, they lose the capacity to build. Rome fell, and they forgot how to make concrete for 1,000 years. We think we are immune to that. We are not immune. We could lose the technology. We could lose the drive. So when I say Trump is the wrecking ball, I mean it in the most necessary sense. We need to smash this calcified, infected structure. We need to clear the debris of this ideology so we can return to reality. We need to return to a world where competence is king, where merit is the only thing that matters, where we judge people by their skill and their character, not their identity file. Because the alternative is the dark. The alternative is the collapse. And I want us to go to the stars. I want us to pass the Great Filter. But we can't do that if we are fighting about pronouns while the fuselage cracks. We have to wake up before we never wake up again. But the collapse is not inevitable. That is the important thing to remember. We have a choice. We can choose the darkness, or we can choose the stars. I talk about Star Trek a lot. I'm a huge fan. And the reason I love it is because it presents a vision of the future where humanity has grown up. We have transcended these petty, tribal squabbles. In that future, you do not become the chief engineer of the enterprise because you checked a box on a diversity form. You get the job because you are the only one who can fix the warp core in 3 minutes when the Romulans are firing at you. That is the world I want to build. That is the world we must build. I want a future where my kids, and your kids, are judged solely by the quality of their code, whether that code is actual software, or their surgery skills, or their ability to build a house. I want them to be evaluated on their output, not their inputs. The Democrats, with this obsession over identity, are trying to drag us back into a feudal system where your bloodline determines your worth. It is regression disguised as progress. What we are seeing now with the DOJ, this crackdown on the DEI apparatus, is the first step in a massive system update. It is the beginning of the restoration of competence. Now, do not expect this to be easy. When you delete a virus that has integrated itself into the system files, the computer is going to lag. It might glitch. The people who have built their entire careers on the grievance industry are going to scream. The media is going to run 24/7's headlines, calling this the end of democracy. Let them scream. It is just the sound of the parasite detaching from the host. We have to have the stomach to push through the noise. We have to support the leaders who are willing to take the arrows for us. Because if we can reestablish the principle that the best person gets the job, if we can optimize for excellence again, there is no limit to what the United States can do. We can fix the economy, we can secure the border, we can get to Mars, but it starts with the law. Justice should not see color, it should not see gender, it should only see facts. For the first time in decades, the Department of Justice has finally taken off those polarized, racist sunglasses. They are finally looking at the raw data again. We need to let them work. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Not the emotional reaction, but the logical one. Look at your own workplace, your own university. Are you seeing an optimization for excellence or an optimization for optics? Tell me what the data looks like on the ground in the comments. I am curious to see the signal amidst the noise. And leave yourself with this one question to think about tonight. If we do not return to a meritocracy today, who is going to be competent enough to keep the lights on for your grandchildren tomorrow? Think about that.